Okay, so yeah, as I said, we're starting just a couple of minutes early. Welcome to Friday afternoon. Thank you very much. I am very impressed that there's so many of you here, especially considering how dreary it is on relatively short notice out there. So better jump right in. My name is Sean, by the way. Throw that out there. So what are we going to do today? I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to who I am, and not really why I'm here, but I guess just a little bit about me. And then we are going to talk about Odysseus. We're going to talk about who he is, why do we care, and then where does he go? It's underground or underworld. And then we are going to talk about some various conceptions of the underworld. We know of Odysseus primarily through Homer. I think that was the assigned reading, chapter 11 or book 11. So we're going to talk about the Homeric conception of the underworld, as well as another ancient author that's roughly contemporaneous with Homer named Hesiod, and then some theoretical and reconstructed conceptions of the underworld. And then we are going to jump into my personal favorite, the creature feature. So we're going to talk about Cerberus, and I'm going to show you a terrible movie clip, and it's going to be glorious, or at least I think it is. So we're going to jump in. Who the hell is this guy? So my name is Sean. I was previously in this department, but I am not any longer. I am in the Faculty of Education. I work in technologies and education. So I know from past history that there's quite a few ed students that take this course. So if you are an ed student and you want some tech help, please feel free to come visit me on Ed North. My offices, or our offices are 3104. We offer tech help, but we also, if you have an assignment and there's a tech component and you're just not sure how to integrate it, you can come ask us. If you have an idea for a classroom activity and you want either tech help or have the tech and want some teaching help, that's kind of why we're there. So that's my little pitch. That's the payment I extract from Tristan. Pitch my job. But while I was here, I was a Roman archaeologist. I primarily focused on artwork and religion and ritual. So basically anything that's art and Roman, I dig. And that just realized was a terrible pun for an archaeologist to make. But my primary interest was in early Christianity, specifically the early centuries where there is the least material and the work is the hardest. Did I mention I'm no longer part of this department? But in any event, that's who I am. And I try to throw art into all of my slides. So you should see some art. And if you have any questions about the art, we can always answer them after class. If you want to kind of stick around and talk about it. That's who I am. But who's this Odysseus guy? And why do we care? Well, he's a man in the ancient world and he's a king, so I guess that kind of puts him above pretty much everybody else. But he's king of Ithaca. And he's one of our Greek heroes. So these are guys who go off and do outrageous and outlandish things and get written about in books by, say, Homer or Hesiod and so on. The two books that we know primarily through the Iliad and the Odyssey. These are Homeric texts. Your translation of the Odyssey refers to him as a man of twists and turns. The Greek on this gets translated variously, all different which ways, but he's basically a smart and complicated man. And in a world of Greek heroes like Hercules, who basically just beat things up until they stop moving, this makes him kind of a cut above. And in that way, he is somewhat of an anti-Achilles. Achilles in Homeric myth is kind of irrational and angry and just always arguing with everybody. And Odysseus is kind of this calm, rational, loyal figure. Or because he's a Greek hero, he's calmer. He's rationaler and loyaler. He's not a good guy, but he's kind of a little bit more on the reasonable end as far as we're concerned. So, what happens to Odysseus? Why are we talking about him? He goes on a journey. After the Trojan War is over, he, with his crew, get on their boat and leave Troy. And he just wants to go back to Ithaca. But a bunch of events happen, and this is they're numbered. The numbers are really small, but it's not tremendously important, at least for what I'm teaching you today. But every time he tries to go home, he gets blown off course or sent somewhere else, and he just can't get back to Ithaca. Even when he thinks he's directly going to go specifically back home, he just doesn't end up going there. And the event right before he goes to the underworld has him, it's number 7 on here. He goes to visit, he gets sent to a witch, and her name is either Kirke or Circe. This is just the way that over time pronunciations differ. It doesn't matter which one you use. I will almost certainly flip back and forth because I'm easily confused. I'm sorry if that confuses you guys. She suffers from the unfortunate reality of being a woman in an ancient myth, which means that she's a temptress and she's evil and she's going to do all kinds of horrible things, including magic, to the hero, our man. And one of the things that she does is, as soon as all of Odysseus's men come to visit her, she turns them all into pigs, because of course she does. But little known fact, we actually have direct video evidence of them being turned into pigs that I'm going to show you right now.
You dare to challenge me? You're not warriors. You're pigs. You're all pigs.
Oh, I see. I should have done. Okay. Anyway, I just wanted to show that because I thought it was hilarious, and it was the first thing I thought of when I'm like, oh, she turns them into pigs. I know what that's like. So Odysseus was still at the boat when his crew gets turned into pigs, and he gets visited by Hermes, who, and this is not a joke, gives him Molly, and the Molly protects him. Now, it is not Molly, as we understand it today. It's some kind of ancient herb, but I thought it was hilarious that he just gives him Molly, and he's like, yeah, you'll be fine. Just go. And so Hermes gives him this mystical material, and what is depicted here in this painting is Kirke offering a drink to Odysseus, and this drink is supposed to, I don't know if it turn him into a pig or just supposed to intoxicate him. It's supposed to take him out. But because he did Molly beforehand, he just, he's fine. He's totally fine. Nothing impacts him at all. And she's terrified, and he makes her transform all of his crew back into people. And then she's like, okay, I did that. Sorry about the whole pig thing. You guys want to have a party? And they do, because why not? And towards the end of the party, he gets a new mission from Circe, from Kirke, and that mission is to go to the underworld. So first you have to get to the underworld, and this is, I believe, taken directly from your reading. So what I was originally going to do is read through this. So I think I'm going to do that anyway. I like to do that. It helps to go through the material, and just in case you didn't read it. The lustrous goddess answered, never pausing, royal son of Laertes, Odysseus, born for exploits, let no lack of pilot at the helm concern you. No, just step to your mast and spread your white sail wide. Sit back, and the north wind will speed you on your way. But once your vessel is cut across the ocean river, you will raise a desolate coast, and Persephone's grove, her tall black poplars, willows whose fruit die young. Beach your vessel hard by the ocean's churning shore, and make your own way down to the moldering house of death. Then there is and there into Acheron, the flood of grief, 2 rivers flow, the torrent river of fire, the wailing river of tears that branches off from Styx, the stream of hate. And a stark crag looms where the 2 rivers thunder down and meet. This place sounds great. So he has to go there. And then once he's there, he has to perform a ritual to commune with the dead. And this ritual is called the Nekia, and it has a whole bunch of parts. So once there, go forward, hero. Do as I say now. Dig a trench about a forearm's depth and length, and around it pour libations out to all the dead. First with milk and honey, and then with mellow wine, and then water, third and last. And sprinkle glistening barley all over it. And vow again and again to the dead, to the drifting, listless spirits of their ghosts, that once you return to Ithaca, you will slaughter a barren heifer in your halls, the best you have, and load a pyre with treasures. And to Tiresias, I always forget how to pronounce that, alone, apart, you will offer a sleek black ram, and the pride of all your herds. And once your prayers have invoked the nations of the dead in their dim glory, slaughter a ram in black hue, turning both their heads towards Erebus, that's towards Hades or towards Tartarus, towards the underworld. But turn your head away, looking toward the ocean river. Suddenly then the countless shades of the dead and gone will surge around you. But order your men at once to flay the sheep that lie before you, killed by your ruthless blade, and burn them both. And then say prayers to the gods, to the almighty god of death and dread Persephone. But you draw your sharp sword from beside your hip, sit down on alert there, and never let the ghosts of the shambling, shiftless dead come near that blood, till you have questioned Tiresias yourself. Soon the great seer will appear before you, the stages of your voyage, how you can cross the swarming sea and reach home at last. So you can't get home. First, you've got to go to this really awful place, murder a bunch of animals, and talk to the dead. And Tiresias is the one who's going to tell him how to get home. Hey folks, unfortunately this is where I had trouble in class, and the computer kind of locked up for a few minutes. So the audio for this slide and the next slide were lost. Thankfully, I can just reiterate what I said, and what this is just a point-by-point listing of what happened in the passage that we just read, and what you had as your assigned reading. So this is more or less just a way of parsing it out for you, but definitely go back to the original text and see these items for yourself. But this is just a nice kind of list. And the only thing that I pointed out on this particular slide was that the sacrifice was of a barren heifer, which struck me as a little odd because a heifer is a female cow that has yet to give birth. And so that you would want a young female cow that hasn't given birth, that is barren, struck me as odd, but I didn't know what to do with that. I just thought it was worth pointing out. So the audio for this slide was also lost, but just to kind of reiterate what I said initially, I split the events into two columns. So the start of the event is at the top left, edge of the world, and then it goes down to sacrifice a cow, and then it goes sacrifice treasure, and all the way down to ward off some, talk to others. And I just did this to prevent having a giant list that you had to kind of sift through, because there's a lot that happens in the Nekia. It's a complicated ritual that is difficult to set up, and also you have to do things while in the ritual. And the thing that I pointed out here is that Odysseus was warned to ward off some of the spirits that wanted to drink the blood until he had spoken to Tiresias, until he had gotten the information that he needed. So he was to ensure that he got the information that he needed, but not let anyone else speak beforehand. And you'll find out when we discuss the actual passage that he doesn't quite follow those instructions exactly. Yeah, I think we're going to keep going and see if that stays okay. Okay, so who gets summoned? Who are the shades, the dead that come out when Odysseus performs the Nekia? So the first person who comes out is Elpenor. Elpenor was one of his shipmates that went and got himself killed during that massive party with Kirke. And one of the things that happened, he's upset because Odysseus didn't bury him properly. They didn't perform the necessary rituals. They just left him there because he apparently just got drunk and fell down a hill and cracked his head or something. So, I mean, but they had to get to the underworld very quickly. Very important. But here's the deal. He talks to Elpenor. He doesn't wait. He doesn't say, you can't have the blood. He talks to him. Then his mom shows up, Anticlea. He doesn't know his mom is dead, but then he sees her. And he's like, no, you can't take the blood. I'm waiting for this other guy who's really important. He's the one I have to talk to. He talked to Elpenor, but his own mother, who he didn't even know was dead, he's like, nah, you wait. And then so Tiresias shows up. This is the Theban seer that tells him this long, complicated way of how he's going to get home. And then Odysseus now has the information he needs, and so everything else is kind of extra. Everything else is, he's kind of finished his mission. And so then he's like, all right, Mom, what? And then after he finishes talking to his mother, a literal parade of just women are put forward to him. These are women that have given birth to princes or married powerful princes, and their genealogies are just completely linked to the men in their lives. And then he gets a series of former companions. Agamemnon was the head of the Greek kind of invasion into Troy. He was the head of the Trojan War. Anybody familiar with Bronze Age Greek terminology? He was the Wanax, but that doesn't really matter. And then Achilles was the whiny guy who kills everybody and then, continues to whine, but he's dead. And Ajax, who's big and strong and powerful. These are three former companions of Odysseus that he talks to. And then he sees many, many other kind of figures that are associated with the underworld. So Minos is the judge of Hades. He sees Orion's associated with the underworld, like, sure, okay, but he sees them hunting in asphodel, which is they're meadows, and it's kind of a fruit-bearing flower. And he sees him kind of endlessly hunting around and around and around. And then there's Tityus, Tantalus, and Sisyphus, who are all being tortured to some degree. And then he encounters Hercules. And Hercules is just chilling. He's just like, I'm here. Life sucked up there. I was under the servitude of some guy who gave me all these chores that I had to do. And I even came down here and I murdered Cerberus, which is why there's no Cerberus in the Odyssey, because it's dead already, because Hercules killed it. But that's something to keep in mind when you're reading ancient myth. When it's happening is always sort of kind of amorphous. And I don't mean when it was written. I just mean where they situated in kind of mythic history. For this particular, in the Odyssey, Cerberus is already dead because Hercules' labors have been completed. But yeah, so these are kind of the people that Odysseus talks with. And so, and this is just a depiction of modern painting of Tiresias and Odysseus. So, what does this tell us about the Homeric conception of the underworld? What is Homer's underworld like, based on what we've just seen? Well, there are actually two kind of underworlds in Homer. There's Tartarus, Erebus, and Hades. That's kind of they're all the same thing, and that's the one that we were just talking about. But in Book 4, he mentions the Elysian Fields, and that's a different underworld. Erebus, the underworld we're in now, sucks. There's shades and pain and torment. People are there and they're not happy. But in the Elysian Fields, we only have one line, and it goes, "Life glides on in immortal ease for mortal men." So apparently the Elysian Fields are pretty awesome. But he doesn't say anything else about the Elysian Fields. So we don't really know what else, if anything, he thought about it. But that is a concept that is in other authors. So that's very interesting. But what about those people who were down there in Erebus, in Tartarus, kind of being tortured? So there's one, Tityus. He's a son of Gaia. He's a Titan. He was punished for assaulting Leto. Leto is the mother of Apollo and Artemis. And he gets like stretched out on a rack, and his liver is pecked out by a vulture on a daily basis, and then it grows back. And the liver is kind of associated with some kind of sexual stuff. I don't know. That's a bit beyond me. But This, I wish I had a better picture, but this is a house painting from a Roman house in probably Pompeii. Oh no, it's the Esquiline Hills in Rome. And the Danaids are here. So the Danaids have no place in when Odysseus goes down into the underworld, but they later on become associated with the underworld as another group of people who are tortured. So the Danaids are very, very quickly 50 women who get to marry 50 men in Egypt, and their dad is like, I don't want you to marry those men, so on your wedding night, kill your husband. And of course, because it's ancient myth, 49 of the Danaids kill their husbands, and for this betrayal, they are punished in kind of later myth, where they constantly have to get water, but the jug that they get the water from just leaks instantly. So they're supposed to fill up some water, and they can never do it. And they're just forced to repeat that task over and over and over again. Another figure that we talked about here is Sisyphus. So he's the founder of Corinth, the mythical founder of Corinth. And he's kind of an archetypical trickster. He goes around and he has a lot of laughs, but unfortunately it comes back to bite him in the ass. So one of the things that he did that really got Zeus mad is he told a figure named Osippus the whereabouts of his daughter. His daughter didn't want to be found, and she was kind of under Zeus's protection. And he told the secret of where she was, and also that Zeus had abducted her. So Zeus was pretty pissed off about this, and he sent Thanatos to kill Sisyphus. So in some later traditions, he sends Hades to do it, but he sends a god to wipe this guy out. Thanatos actually doesn't kill him. He brings him back to Tartarus and chains him up and leaves him there. And Sisyphus gets chatting with Thanatos, and he's like, these are pretty awesome chains. How did you lock them up again? And Thanatos is like, oh, I just did this. And somehow he gets locked in his own chains. And Sisyphus says bye and leaves. Thanatos chained up in Tartarus. The gods are so angry because now no one can die on Earth because Thanatos is the one who has to go and get them and kill them. And also that this, it's a pretty big FU to the gods, so that they're not happy about that. So Ares has to go down and free Thanatos, and Sisyphus gets tortured for his... there's another aspect to this. His wife, he also tells his wife, don't finish the death ritual. Now think back to, we had the traveling companion that didn't have the death ritual set up and he's angry about it. Well, for Sisyphus, he says, don't finish the death ritual. And so when Sisyphus is killed, he goes to Hades, and it varies based on the myth, but he says, hey, I didn't get the proper rituals, so can I go back to Earth and complain to my wife? Because she's the one who was supposed to do it, and I'm really, really mad. And depending on, sometimes it's Persephone, sometimes it's another god, but whatever. It's like, yeah, sure, no problem. Go back to Earth and go tell your wife off. And he goes back and he's like, oh my God, this was so terrible. You did this thing, but like, I'm back on Earth, so I'm not going back down to Hades. So he just stays up on Earth. But his punishment when he does die is that he has to roll or lift a boulder up a hill over and over and over again, and every single time he gets to the top, it just rolls back down to the bottom. And he just has to keep doing that over and over and over. This is also called a Sisyphean task. If you've ever heard someone refer to, they're like beating their head against a wall, and like, this is a Sisyphean task. I don't know, it's a really high budge place you're working at that like people are angry about having to do the same thing over and over again. But yeah, it's something that seemingly never ends. Okay, so that was kind of Homer's underworld. But another author that we have is Hesiod. And in Hesiod's underworld, it sounds a lot nicer. So we've got here, this is from Works and Days, and those are the line numbers if you want to look it up yourself. And they live with a carefree heart on the islands of the blessed on the banks of the deep swirling river Okinos. Heroes that they are, and for them there is honey-sweet harvest that comes to fruition 3 times each year, produced by the love-giving land, or life-giving land. So, it sounds pretty awesome. I think that's a nice place to be. But Hesiod also talks about what the underworld was in other ages. That's Hesiod combines or discusses things in ages. And this is for people who were before. That was a time that no longer exists. And if you read Hesiod, what he actually says is, now is the time of the Iron Generation, if only I died before it or had been born after it. And that seemed to me, I guess it's a fairly old meme now, but the wrong generation. The music of my day, if only I'd been born in the right decade so I can listen to the good music. He wants to get to the good death. It's also, he doesn't explicitly call it the Elysian Fields, at least in the translation that we're working with here, and it is for those that died in a previous heroic age, but it seems very nice, and it tracks with the Elysian Fields, the concept. But it does seem to be people from the heroic age only. In other ages, they aren't there. Okay, in other authors, the authors don't really matter, but just know that there are scenarios where we talked about Minos being a judge in the underworld. Well, some later authors say actually there's 3 judges of the underworld: Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. So these are kind of in later traditions. They're judges in the underworld for various tasks, various things. There's Charon, who ferries people across either the river Acheron or Lake Acherusia or the river Styx, or you get kind of these things melding together. Charon is one of those things that the ferryman has become popular in a whole lot of other modern kind of setups. This is some modern fan art from, I think, a game, might be a world that's kind of quasi based on ancient Greek history or ancient Greek myth. But the idea is you bury with a coin in their mouth to pay the ferryman, so he'll guide you across. And then of course we have Cerberus. Cerberus, the kind of hellhound that guards the entrance to Hades. And as I mentioned, he's already dead in the Odyssey. Hercules has finished Cerberus. So what about these theoretical constructions? This is a complicated graphic that Dr. Ellenberger really wanted me to show you guys. So I don't particularly like this graphic, but I'm gonna do my best. So first of all, it's a little difficult to understand what you're looking at, but you can see a label kind of in the middle where it says Circe's Island, and then there's like a little boat that's going between the different layers. The problem is that it's actually inverted from the map. So I'm going to flip to the map, and we can see that we've got Circe's Island on the right, and we've got the kind of that direction towards the underworld is on the left. That line that's going across the Western Mediterranean towards Spain, that's to go to the underworld. Well, in fact, if we flip it around, so instead we start Circe's Island on the left-hand side, and then we go all the way to the right, that's what this graph is depicting, is we are on the Circe's Island is kind of the inhabited world, the Mediterranean is on the left-hand side, and then we go to the underworld far off into the right. But there's all of these other kind of elements that they talk about in the publication is down below. And it's based on the descriptions in Homer of these different elements of the underworld. And they focus in on Orion. And the reason they focus in on Orion is called Giant Orion. And in their words, that must mean he's already a constellation because he's big. This is academic logic. So it's fine, okay, fine, that works. But they also equate all of the other activities that are found that I just read to you, those repeated tasks over and over and over again. Well, if Orion is already a constellation, those repeated tasks must be the regular transit of stars. And so we're dealing with an upper sky-based underworld. And I've kind of put it in quotes here, heaven above. Now, the reason that they've done this is they are trying to find similarities, cross-cultural similarities in Greek and Roman myth, as well as Egyptian myth, and also Mesopotamian myth. They're trying to kind of create this concept of unification. I'm not sure if I buy it, but it is very interesting to engage in these sort of different lenses where you can take a look at these things and see what's going on. So so these repeated tasks, the tortured, hunting over and over again, the judgment over and over. Even Hercules gets thrown in there, even though Hercules is literally just chilling in the Odyssey. He's not doing any repetitive tasks, unless bitching is a repetitive task. I'm not really sure, but they group it in. That these are the figures, and they equate it to the transit of stars. So that is that. Any questions on any of the material that I've covered thus far? I'm actually blazing through this a lot faster than I thought I would, so I hope it's not confusing. Okay, cool. Well, now we get to jump into the creature feature, which is basically what I've been wanting to do for the last 2 weeks. So, creature feature is on Cerberus, or Kerberos. It's that hard C, soft C kind of thing again. And this is Hades' guard dog. And it's not to guard, it's kind of to guard people from getting in, but it's mostly to prevent people from escaping. The Cerberus is there to make sure you can't leave. Because of the labors of Hercules and Cerberus' untimely death, Hercules and Cerberus are linked. Their narratives, you often don't hear about Cerberus without also reference to Hercules. So that is a thing. That being said, Cerberus doesn't have 3 heads in all of his versions, and I'm going to show you some of that. So he very often has 3 heads, but because there's no middle ground, sometimes he's got 50. I don't know why that is. It's actually one of our oldest sources. It's Hesiod that has Cerberus with 50 heads, but there you go. Cerberus also has a snake tail and snakes on his back. And I say here could be linked with the 50 heads. What I mean by that is if he's got snakes on his back, he also seems to have 50 heads. Not that the concept of having snakes on your back also gives you 50 heads. Now, why do you think there might be snakes involved? Have you guys done much on that? Yeah.
He's from the underworld, so it could be representing chthonic.
Yeah. So exactly. So chthonic is kind of the underground, the underground forces, and snakes are a creature that it's called a liminal creature in kind of anthropological theory. They move between worlds. So a snake, it's a land animal. It slithers along the ground, but then it goes underground, and it disappears into the underworld. It goes to the chthonic places, but then it comes back up again. And this is considered powerful. It can freely go between levels that people cannot. And so snakes, you will see snakes in funerary art throughout the entire ancient Mediterranean. It's very, very common. And it's not the only one, just one of the ones. Yeah.
You also see snakes on like beaches and stuff. It doesn't have to do with that necessarily then. So is there any correlation between like the snake's interpretation and there?
Not necessarily. I haven't done a whole lot on Aegis imagery, so I can't say for certain if they're not linked with death in that, because I know there's a Gorgon, and snakes and the Gorgon are connected, so that's probably where they come from. And on the Gorgon, there's snakes. It's kind of linked with death, but so it's kind of like you start getting several degrees separated out. But yes, definitely, just because there's a snake doesn't automatically mean there's chthonic connotations. It's a common thing. And if you're talking about death and you start to see snakes in art, you're like, I know why there's snakes here. That's kind of the more, it's a good point to bring up, that it's not always the case. Okay, so Hesiod talks about Cerberus, and in a big long list of all these monsters that have been born, he's like, this one's born, and this one's born, and this one's born, and then he talks about Cerberus, the carnivore Cerberus, Hades' bronze baying hound, 50-headed, and an irresistible force. So, if something has got 50 heads, I think it's probably an irresistible force, so I think that tracks in my mind. But again, Hesiod is one of our earliest sources. It's roughly he's roughly contemporaneous with when the Homeric poems are being written down. So we're talking 8th century BCE, well, some of the earliest Greek that we have. Hesiod, in another set of passages here, in front of that stand the echoing halls of mighty Hades and dread Persephone. Underworld gods and a frightful, pitiless hound stands guard. That's Cerberus. And he has a mean trick. When someone comes in, he fawns upon him, wagging his tail and dropping his ears. I don't know how you're going to get tricked if he's got 50 heads. But, all right. But he will not allow anyone to leave. He runs down and eats anyone he catches leaving Persephone's and Hades' gates. So, I don't know, maybe any of you ever watched the movie Cujo? This dog terrorizes a family for the whole movie, but right at the end they do this emotional thing where the dog kind of whimpers and you look at his face. And I mean, when I watched it in high school, everyone's like, "Aw." But like this dog was literally trying to kill them the whole time. So maybe 50 heads worth of that, you could do it. This is a selection from Pseudo-Apollodorus. Pseudo-Apollodorus, I'm just got some notes underneath here. He is a 1st or 2nd century author writing in Greek. So it's kind of like Roman times, but he's still writing in Greek. And his major work is called the Bibliotheca, or it's a library. One of our biggest sources for myth. If you know any myth, almost certainly you know it from Apollodorus, or Pseudo. There was a real Apollodorus. He has nothing to do with myth. And for many, many years, people just called this guy Apollodorus because they thought they were the same person. He's really Pseudo-Apollodorus, but when we're talking about myth and you say Apollodorus, everyone knows you mean Pseudo-Apollodorus. So when Hades asked Plauton, that's Pluto or Hades, for Cerberus, Plauton told him to take him if he could defeat him without any of his weapons he carried. Heracles found Cerberus by the gates of Acheron and encased by his breastplate and covered entirely by the lion's skin. He threw his arms around Cerberus' head and did not stop holding on and choking the beast until he prevailed, even though he was being bitten by the serpent that served as its tail. So he took Cerberus and returned, making his ascent through Troezen. Demeter turned Asclepius into an owl, and Heracles showed Cerberus to Eurystheus and then brought him back to the house of Hades. So in Hesiod, he doesn't kill Cerberus. He just captures him, brings him back, and then takes him home. But he's dead in Homer. So, these stories have multiple kind of revisions, multiple versions. Now, this is another author that talks about Cerberus, and I really wanted to include this because, so this is Palaephatus. He's a 4th century BCE author writing in Greek, so very much kind of the era of classical Athens, or just after. And he is a rationalizing author. So what this means is he is the actually guy from the ancient world who says myth is dumb, none of this happened, and here's how it really played out. And so he says here, it has been said of Cerberus that he was a dog with 3 heads. It is clear that he too was called this from the city called 3 Peaks, just like Gerones. Gerones is a guy with, I think, 50 arms or something. Anyway, he's got a lot of arms and heads. People used to say the 3-peaker dog is large and fine-looking. It has also been said mythically that Heracles brought him up out of Hades. It happened as follows. He knows. He among all the other people, knows exactly what happened. Gerones had large, fearless dogs who looked after his cattle. One was named Cerberus, the other Orthos. Heracles killed Orthos in 3 Peaks before he drove off the cattle, but Cerberus followed along with the cattle. A Mycenaean named Molossus decided he wanted the dog. First, he asked Eurystheus to sell it to him, but when Eurystheus refused, he bribed the cattle herders and confined the dog in a cave in Taenaran in Laconia, with the intention of using him as a stud dog. So he's got this whole thing planned out. Like, not only was Cerberus a real dog, but like he was so good, he wanted to be used for stud. He put many females down in the cave for Cerberus to mount. I think maybe Palaephatus is just projecting a little bit. Came to where he had been told the dog was, went down to the cave, brought out the dog. People said Heracles has brought up the dog after descending to Hades through the cave. So I just want to emphasize that this trend of trying to explain myth exists in the ancient world. It's contemporaneous with the people writing the myth. These stories are widely varied. And it looks like I blazed through absolutely everything, so I'm going to be able to show the whole clip and probably still have a couple of minutes. That's crazy. So, Hey folks, it looks like the audio for this slide was also lost, but I think this one was my fault. I had turned off the wireless microphone in order to let the movie just play out, and I forgot to turn it back on. So there's nothing recorded here. It's just a summary of what we learned today. So we learned about Odysseus and his various travels, the ritual Nekia, I should have put in the slides here as well, and the usage of the Nekia to get into the underworld. We talked about different conceptions of the underworld with ancient authors, Homer and Hesiod, as well as some other kind of ideas of the of underworld or underworlds, and a theoretical reconstruction from modern scholars of how to possibly envision that with a heavenly kind of above in a sky underworld rather than down below. And then we segued into the guardian of the underworld, Cerberus, and the creature feature. So we learned about his association with Hercules, that he's an underworld guardian, and that not all stories have him with 3 heads. Sometimes, for whatever reason, he's got 50. And then, of course, we watched the greatest film ever recorded, clip of Hercules killing Cerberus with a very tiny knife, and Cerberus, the model, sets himself on fire because that's just the best. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the class, and yeah, good luck with the rest of the term.